Hello and welcome to episode 15 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Justin Binkowski. And tonight we're going to preview the fourth stage of the Call of Duty League, and we're going to discuss quite a bit of roster mania, including a blockbuster benching, also involving Huke for the second time this season, and we're going to give our predictions for the first week of Stage 4, the first 10 matches of Stage 4 group play. How are you doing, Bink?
I'm alright, having some internet troubles, so if I randomly drop out in the middle of this episode, you guys know why, but hopefully that doesn't happen.
Hopefully, we did run into internet issues, what was it, like 4 or 5 episodes ago where the stream crashed because of my internet. So, I mean, if Bink does have his internet die, I mean, the show will not just abruptly end like it did last time, but I probably won't be doing a whole lot of talking. Just be waiting for him to come back. So hopefully it doesn't happen. But let's start off with the biggest news that just dropped about an hour ago, maybe an hour and a half ago. The Los Angeles Thieves, they announced that they have benched Huke, who they acquired from the Dallas Empire 3 weeks ago. I looked it up. I believe he was acquired on May 4th, which would make it 20 days ago that he was acquired. They have benched him, and they have brought back TJ Haley, however you say it, Tej. They're bringing him back into the starting lineup after he was benched for Huke during Stage 3 group play. Just an incredibly confusing, incredibly shocking move here. I want to read JCap's tweet before I get your take on it. JCap, who is the LA Thieves head coach, he said, "We haven't been seeing the same level of consistency as a team, and with Stage 4 starting, we decided to make the tough call to bring Tej back and improve upon where we last left off with him." What do you think about this move, Bink?
It's a real head scratcher for me. I get the reasoning, but like they sign Huke to seemingly be like that franchise guy, right? Like that seems like all indications what we heard from people like Nate Shot on the pre-show and stuff like that. And it's still a relatively small sample size too, right? Because they had that one match with him in Stage 3 group play, and then they went 1-2 at the major because they lost, and then they won, and then they lost. So they went 1-3. They played 4 series with Huke, and now he's just benched again. I mean, from like the TJ standpoint, like it kind of makes sense. They were looking good with TJ, and that was kind of one of the things where it was like some people were surprised that the Thieves were the team to land Huke, and that Huke was replacing TJ. So in that regard, it makes sense that they're going back to that roster to seeing if they can pick up where they left off. But it's still a super interesting move in the sense that, you likely spent a lot of money to acquire Huke, and he plays 4 series, and now he's just benched again. So, not really sure if we're going to hear any. I mean, I hope we hear more from maybe Nade Shot or Mud Dog or anything beyond what we've heard from JCap, but, yeah, it's just, we're going to have to see how it plays out, I guess.
So they, like you said, they went 1-3 with Huke in the lineup. They lost that first series in group play to the Subliners, who ended up finishing first in the group, and they finished second in the major. So I don't think anybody would blame. I don't think even with TJ in the lineup, I don't think people would have seen that loss as, incredibly surprising or damning of, how that roster performed. Then they lose to the Mutineers in winners bracket round 1 of the major. They sweep the London Royal Ravens in the losers bracket, and then they lose to the Toronto Ultra, who were the defending major champions, and they had only been knocked into the losers bracket by Atlanta, and they lost that match 3-1. So your losses are to Toronto, Florida, and New York. Obviously, Florida is kind of an outlier. New York and Toronto are viewed as top teams in the league, regardless of what result came out of that event. But Florida played well. They were in the winners bracket to begin with, which was surprising. So I guess you could say that loss was disappointing, but overall I didn't think their results said make the change, but obviously maybe practice did or something like that.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing too is that Venom has avoided both changes here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like you would think, not even saying like Venom's played bad or anything, but just like with the presumed large buyout that you likely paid to acquire Huke, it seems like they would want to have him in the lineup. So if they think going TJ is the right move, they might want to try TJ for Venom and then do like Kenny, Draza, TJ, and Huke. But obviously, they just want to go back to that pre-Huke lineup, and we're gonna have to see what happens.
JCap actually tweeted about Venom. He said, "If you want to roast me, go for it, have fun. But if you're roasting Venom at all, you haven't actually been watching the team play and are basing your opinions solely off gamer tags." And then he responded to someone who said he's the most inconsistent player on the team. Just say the higher ups are in love with his potential and be done with it. And JCap responded that, said, "I watch every map the team plays in scrims, matches, everything. Venom has been the I think he means he's been the best SMG player to be on our team this year. You don't have to agree with me on it, but I'm telling you that for a fact." So he seems very committed to keeping Venom in the lineup no matter what kind of moves they make. But the biggest thing for me about Huke's benching is Nate Shot, his comments on Huke being acquired. So this was, like I said, 20 days ago on May 4th. He tweeted, "Huke is a generational FPS talent. He will go down as a top 10 player all time when everything is said and done. I truly believe that. When a player like that becomes available, you do whatever it takes to sign him. So excited to have him here at LA Thieves." That kind of statement from the founder and CEO and just an incredibly influential figure in the Call of Duty esports community, that goes a long way. And that's why I'm so surprised that the owner or the higher ups, the executives, whatever you want to call them, they obviously saw Huke's availability after being benched by Dallas as something to go after. They knew, let's go for him. Like, it doesn't matter how well he fits into our team or what our team is really doing at the moment, because at the time they had the opportunity to be the first seed in their group. They benched TJ for Huke ahead of a match. If they had beaten New York, and I think they would have needed FaZe to lose their match because of tiebreakers. But regardless, they would have tied for the best record in their group. They would have went 4-1 had they beaten New York, and they still made that move. So that's why when you bench him now, it's been less than 3 weeks. You've had 4 matches total, and that's 20 days. And the last 8 of them, there's been nothing because, or last I don't know, whatever, 7 days, there's been nothing because it's been a break week for the league other than All-Star stuff. That's why I'm really surprised with this type of move.
Yeah, I think first off, sorry. First off, based on JCap's tweet, I think that's pretty well worded. Obviously, I wasn't trying to roast Venom. Like I said, I think he's a good player. I enjoyed watching him in Challengers. I just think, based on that money, like I said, it would have made sense to maybe experiment with TJ replacing Venom. But obviously, JCap says he watches all the maps and stuff, so he's got a better idea than me. But other than that, I think Need Shot might be an exception in the sense where, a lot of the owners in the league, obviously guys like Hex and Hastro, they have a say in, player moves, I would imagine, obviously. But, a lot of, traditional owners in sports and other things, and probably some of these other, teams where the owners aren't, huge figures in COD, they probably don't have as much say as, the general manager who you pay to make the moves. But I think this is one move, I'm kind of going back and forth in my head right now. I feel like it obviously wasn't just, JCap making this move on his own. And I don't even think it was even just Mud Dog and JCap. I think Nadeshot had to have been involved at some level because, like you said, he put that tweet out. Obviously, he's was very happy to acquire Huke, and I feel like there's no way that they make this move to bench him without Nade's input. I could be wrong, obviously, but that's just my feeling right now, is that he had to have been involved in this decision in some capacity.
I think that's a fair statement, or a fair theory, at least, because I would say a team like Paris. Their owner is, I believe, the son of the former Dodgers owner, the McCourt family. I think it's the son in that family. He owns Paris. I don't think he's ever watched Call of Duty at a like a level like Nadeshot or
Exactly.
Hex or Hastro. Like all of those are former players or content creators or they've been involved in the scene for a long time. So I don't think he would make any kind of decision regarding a player in that kind of capacity, like you're saying. But yeah, I would assume Nate Shot at just a very basic level would be like, they would run it by him. Like Mud Dog, like
Yeah.
Jacob would be like, hey, like we're really not clicking with Huke, and I think we could be better with Tej. Nate Shot, I would assume, has to say, okay, that makes sense to me. You guys do what's best for you, and we might just be talking out of our butts right here, and because we don't really know what the inner workings of the Thieves organization is like, but I would imagine that's the case. And for me, I think of this as a move that is much more in the short term than the long term, because you do have to think about off season and what will
Hmm.
happen when Hook's contract expires at the end of the 2021 season and he's a free agent. And the reason that even in traditional sports that teams acquire big name players in the middle of a season, despite no guarantee of that player re-signing, you usually do it to make a good impression and show that player that you're the destination that that player should want to be in when it comes down to the contract. And Huke has now been benched by the Empire after winning a world championship, and they were in second place in the CDL when they benched him. And then he's been benched by the Thieves after less than 3 weeks and 4 matches. I don't know what Huke is like in real life. He seems like a really quiet, nice kid. Like, I mean, I shouldn't say kid. He's only about a year or two younger than me, but he seems like a nice guy, and he doesn't seem like a problem child like some of the Call of Duty players that we've known over the years that cause issues within their team. But it's gotta feel wrong. It's gotta hurt a little bit to be benched by two teams without, you know, like really getting the opportunity to show exactly what you can bring to them.
We're just a couple months removed from him being one of the top players in Stage 1, right? So,
Hmm.
like, just a couple months after that, he's been benched by two teams. That's just pretty crazy to think about. The other thing, too, we don't know what type of contract he's on, right? Like, there's a chance he could be on like extended for another year or something like that, and he signed for next year with the Thieves. Obviously, we don't know
Yeah.
at all, but like you were saying, like a lot of the pros, at least allegedly, what we've heard is that they signed 1+1 deals in the inaugural season. So most players are presumably going to be free agents in this upcoming offseason. We don't know if that's the case, but I would be super surprised if, well, I guess it doesn't matter if he is a free agent, but I feel like they made the move to get Huke because Nade's saying like all this stuff about him being a generational talent, making me think that it's not just a half a season move. Like they want to build around Huke and Kenny moving forward. That's just the impression that I get from that. Obviously, like I said, we don't really know about the contracts or how that'll all work, but you bring up a good point. He might, this could be another situation where he now benched by the Thieves and he adds them to his little black book of teams that he wants to exact his revenge against. Obviously, like you said, nice kid. So don't really know if it's like that or anything, but it's definitely worth thinking about.
Yeah, it's a very weird situation. Last thing before we move on to our next segment and talk about the groups for stage four. Do you see Hook playing in the CDL again this season? Because we asked this when he was benched in
Yeah.
Dallas, and I don't really remember your exact answer. I said I didn't see it because why would
Hmm.
Dallas give away one of the best players to another team. They ended up doing that. It didn't do anything for the Thieves. So, do you think it happens again? Do you think he shows up somewhere else before the season's over?
Yeah, that's a. I obviously don't remember for sure what my answer was, but I think I said at the time I didn't think we were going to see him, but obviously I wanted to just because he's such a good player and
Mm-hmm.
he's so talented. So it feels wrong to not have him in the pro league, but this could be a situation again where I feel like we might not see him, but I really hope we do. I don't think. I think if we see him play again this year, it will be for the Thieves. I don't see a world where he goes to another team because it would be like trading cash, and I don't know how much sense it makes from a business perspective. So they probably wouldn't get as much money back as they spend, or I don't really know. So that's what I'm thinking. Like, he likely won't play for a team aside from the Thieves. Like maybe the Thieves struggle with this the pre-Huke lineup, and they make a swap to bring him in some capacity. I don't really know, but I guess I'll give the same answer as last time, where no, we most likely won't see him again, but I really hope we do.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly there. It's disappointing, especially, I mean, LA Thieves bench with Huke and Slasher looking mighty fine right now, but they just don't get any playing time now, and we don't really know. I mean, like I said with Dallas, I didn't think it made sense for them to give away a player, even if you're getting cash. I mean, I guess it depends if they're spending millions of dollars for Huke. You have to bite the bullet and say, oh well, like if you guys succeed with him, at least we got a few million out of it. But other than that, I didn't think it made sense for them to allow him to play for another team from a competitive standpoint. From a viewer standpoint, obviously, I want to see him play. I don't care if it's on Paris. I don't care if it's on Seattle, LAT, LAG. Well, LAG would be awesome. But I don't think any of those are probably going to happen. Obviously, like LAT is probably the most likely option if the current roster falls apart and they need to make another change. And I'm not even sure what kind of change that would be because they seem to be behind Venom, and the obviously was already replacing TJ. So the only other option there would be Kenny, and he's been in that lineup without any break for the last year and a half, 2 years, and I just don't see that happening. So it'll be interesting to see if anything comes of it, if he ends up playing at all the rest of the season, which just sucks that we don't have enough teams to really fill out all these rosters. And I mean, some guys are just kind of stuck under contract, but hopefully we see him. If not, nothing we can do about it. And let's move on to our next segment, Stage 4 groups. There was a group drawing last week before the All-Star weekend, which we're not going to discuss because I didn't watch any of it. No offense to the CDL social media team, but I'm not a huge fan of All-Star weekends in any sport, so I don't really watch all that much. But for Stage 4 groups, just like in all the other stages this season, except the first, I guess, did they have a group drawing in this first stage?
Yep.
Okay, so every other stage.
It was based on champs placing.
Okay, so just like every other stage, the top teams got to pick like what team would go to the other group. So there's two groups, Group A and Group B. The top two teams, which are headlining Group A and Group B, Atlanta Phases in Group A, and the New York Subliners, who finished second in the major, who lost to FaZe at the major. They are the top team in Group B. So Group A is as follows: Atlanta FaZe, Optic Chicago, the Los Angeles Thieves, Minnesota Rocker, Paris Legion, and Seattle Surge. And Group B is the New York Subliners, Toronto Ultra, Dallas Empire, Florida Mutineers, Los Angeles Guerrillas, and the London Royal Ravens. Anything stick out to you in these groups in particular?
So these groups are pretty similar to what we saw in Stage 3. Each group has 4 of the same teams competing together. So in Group A last stage, Toronto, Dallas, Florida, and LAG were all in Group A. Now they're in Group B. with New York and London. And then Group B in Stage 3 had Atlanta, Chicago, LA Thieves, and Seattle. So Paris and Minnesota basically swapped groups with New York and London, and from Stage 3 to Stage 4. Which makes Group B a little more competitive, in my opinion. Obviously, last stage we had Atlanta, Optic, LA Thieves, and New York all in the same group, and that resulted in Optic, kind of struggling and starting from the losers bracket. So now, I think this balances the groups a little bit. Whereas, well, I guess you could say, based on the major performance right now, it looks like the top two teams. It should be Atlanta and Optic at the top of Group A, right? Just based on, depends on what Optic we see. If it's the Optic we see who played in the major versus the Optic we saw last group play stage. So regardless, those should be the top two teams in that group. And then Group B, the top two teams should likely be New York and Ultra. And then that third spot in each group is kind of a question mark at this point, especially now with the Thieves switching rosters, right? If we if the Thieves weren't kind of like going back and forth with rosters, I would probably say they're like the clear-cut 2 or 3 seed in Group A. But we have LA Thieves, well, all 4 of those teams really making some kind of change because LA Thieves are switching rosters. We know Major Maniac is coming in from Minnesota. Paris released Classic earlier today, so they are making a move. We don't know for sure what that move will be. It's reportedly going to be Zaptius, but that is unconfirmed. And then Seattle obviously gets Nikki D from Paris. So all those teams are making changes, so that's kind of like a battle for third place, in my eyes at least. And then Group B, you have that same thing where, the top two there, New York and Ultra, in either order. I guess their battle should likely determine it. And, Dallas struggled with Fellow. Now they have Vivid, so that's a new change. Florida was able to get the second spot last group play, so they showed up. So they haven't made a change this stage. So it could be a sign that, they're sticking with what they believe worked last stage and trying to build on that. LAG not making a change, and then London is bringing in Alex and I believe Afro. I don't know if they've announced yet, but I believe he's now in the U.S. So it seems like they're going to play with Afro. But regardless, that's just how I'm picturing the groups in my head. Should be, we saw a lot of close matches last group play in Stage 3, so expecting similar competitiveness in Stage 4 again.
When I made my notes, or made our notes for this podcast, I originally put ATL plus Optic plus LAT plus 3 new teams, basically. And then LAT decided to ruin my notes. So now it's Atlanta and Optic plus 4 new rosters. We, like you said, we don't really know what's going on with Paris for sure, although it does seem likely that Zaptius, who recently played with London, he'll be joining the other European team. And, Classic is now with the Surge, which is interesting. But I don't know if it really, makes them a top 3 contender for this group. But yeah, I would imagine that it's at the moment LAT and Minnesota fighting out for that 3rd spot in the group. But there's a likely chance that LAT could steal that 2nd spot. They were in that position last time with TJ, so there's no guarantee that Optic will end up getting 2nd, or I guess FaZe will get 2nd, although I see that as the less likely option. And then Group B, man, it's really hard because I think of the top 2 teams in this are New York and Toronto, whether you want to flip them or not, like if you want to put Toronto above New York, or, regardless of what happened at the major. But I just see this as the 2 top teams and then 4 underachievers, because Dallas has, we don't know what will happen with Vivid, obviously, but since Stage 2, they've underachieved and they've made the roster changes and it didn't work out with Fellow. Florida has been disappointing, to say the least, just because of how talented Awakening is, how talented Skies is, and how much potential the rest of the roster has. I think this is a a really good team on paper. They just haven't put it together and consistently done it, although they did do a little bit better last stage. And then the bottom two teams, I believe, LAG are my team, but they frustrate the hell out of me, and I don't know if they're going to be able to get above Dallas or Florida or even London to get into the top three and to make their first winners bracket. And we just don't really know what London's all about since they've been switching up their roster so frequently, and we've really never even seen Afro play other than some kind of scrim that he was in Europe for. So there's really nothing that we can take from that to, really give any kind of insight on that. But yeah, that's how I see it. There's really just nothing. I mean, there's the very clear, top 4, top 5 in the league right now. But if you would have asked us the top 4, top 5 at the beginning of stage 3, I think our answers would have been wildly different.
Yeah. I don't want to turn this into an LAG Stan podcast or anything, but we did mention either on the last episode or the episode before that just how close so many other matches are. I believe you said they had the same map count as Florida last stage, and Florida came in second. They came in 5th or something like that. So they had a lot of 3-2 losses last stage. They're sticking with the same roster. That was their first stage with Chino replacing Vivid. So that's one of the things keeping me from saying there's a clear-cut third in this group, just because if LAG's able to turn around 2 of those round 11s or 2 of those game 5s, we could be looking at a winners bracket berth for them, which they were in the winners bracket for stage 1 because they took the Thieves.
Forgot about that. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's possible. I think even in that stage they went 2 and 3 and made winners bracket because of tiebreakers.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that's what the Gorillas have going for them is they're sticking with this roster, which just wasn't able to, push it over the edge and close things out in those close game 5 situations. And if they're able to just figure that out, we could be looking at a strong stage for them. But obviously, like we're saying, both of these groups should be pretty competitive either way.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off of your point, so Dallas, Minnesota, and LAG all finished with 9 wins in the group, and LAG and Minnesota both had 9 and 12 records, and Dallas had 9 and 10. And Florida, who finished in second, had 1 more map win than LAG did, because LAG lost 3 straight game 5s to Dallas, to Minnesota, to Florida. So right there, if they win, even 2 of those, they probably get into the winners bracket, maybe even second place, depending on the tiebreakers. And that's a far cry from getting 4th or 5th in your group and starting in losers bracket. But I mean, that's the life of an LAG fan. You just kind of got to deal with it for the moment. But yeah, let's move on to more roster mania. Obviously, Huke was the big news of today, but we did have big news throughout the week since our last podcast. And now that I say that, I've reminded myself that I should have mentioned at the top that we're doing this on Monday night instead of Tuesday night because I'm getting my second COVID shot on Tuesday afternoon, and I don't want to melt on air and just have a really bad reaction to my shot, because a lot of people are having bad reactions to it. I don't want to do that live on a podcast at midnight. It doesn't sound a lot of fun to me, so that's why we're doing it on Monday. But it should be back next Tuesday. I think that's June 1st. So yeah. So let's go to Rostermania. This was pretty shortly after we did the pod last week. Dallas announced that they were benching Fellow. We had actually talked about it. We said, is the experiment kind of over? Is it proven to not work? And apparently we were right, and they said that it is over. The experiment has finally ended. So they benched Fellow, and they didn't announce a replacement at the time. But a few days later, I believe, was there some... Oh, it was LAG announced that Vivid had been transferred to another team. They didn't announce what the team was, but Vivid shortly after he announced that he was going to the Dallas Empire. He was going to replace Fellow in the lineup. What do you make of Vivid moving to Dallas?
Yeah, so I think the most important part about this is that it's kind of a two-player change from a roles perspective, right? Because um, part of the reason, obviously, we've touched on the Huke move from Dallas multiple times now, and like how there was communication issues allegedly and all that. But part of the reason also was they brought in Fellow to play the second AR, and they wanted to move Illy to a second sub. And he was kind of struggling in stage 3 with that second sub role and wasn't really putting up the numbers. So by bringing in Vivid, who's a fast, aggressive sub player, Illy can now transition back to a second AR role on the team. So from that perspective, it's changing up 2 roles for the team. And I think it's going to be interesting how Vivid and Shotzi work together, because just based on what we've seen from both players in the past, they both are like kind of aggressive, in your face SMG players, right? Like we obviously saw Shotzi at the start of his career in Call of Duty last year. He was kind of playing more of an OBJ role for Dallas. Dallas, that wasn't really working for Dallas, and then they switched it up where Huke went to like that trophy smoke role in MW, and Shotzi was just like running around the map slaying everybody he saw, and he ends up winning MVP. Vivid has been a strong search and destroy player, most notably, but he's also one of those like in your face type SMG players. So I'm gonna have my eyes on the pacing between those two, how they work together, stuff like that. I think that's gonna be the key to Dallas's success with this new lineup. Fellow was a good search player too, so I'm not sure how much of an upgrade Vivid is in that sense over Fellow. Obviously, Vivid has played well in search in the pro league, so yeah, I'm not in like the roles don't matter as much. That's what I was trying to say. So like Illy can run, and he was running an AR in some situations in search. Even with Fellow on the team. So from a role standpoint, that doesn't really matter for search. So I'm not really sure how that Vivid for Fellow swap will play out there. But yeah, like I said, especially in the respawns, I'm going to have my eyes on how Vivid and Shotzi are able to work together.
So this is according to CODLeagueStats.com. You can follow Carson. I believe it's Carson CDL on Twitter. He runs the site, a very, very cool site for statistics. And Vivid is the top player in the league. Obviously, he has a smaller sample size than a lot of these players because he hasn't played for LAG for a while. But he is the top player in the league in engagements over 10 minutes. So he has 52 plus engagements in a 10-minute game, which is 3 more than second place, which is Dylan. Shotzi is 24th in this. So I just thought that was interesting. You're literally, at least statistically in this specific stat, but you can see it in the game, he is maybe the fastest player, at least in terms of hardpoint. This is solely off of hardpoint stats, so control and search aren't factored into this, but at least in hardpoint you're getting one of, if not the fastest player in the league on your roster. That'll be interesting. I don't know how you end up figuring out if it'll work. It just kind of, you don't have a lot of practice either, and that's been an issue for many teams that have made changes either mid-stage or even between stages, because there's only really 1 week off in between the major and group play for the next stage. So at most you're getting maybe 10 days of practice if you're out on the very first day of the major, and then you get maybe the second or third day of group play. So at most you're getting 10 days of practice, and although that's helpful, it's some of these teams like Optic and FaZe, they've been together the entire season, and now New York has had an entire stage with Hydra in the lineup. So, it's really difficult to kind of catch up to some of these other teams with relatively limited practice.
Yep.
And then next we had Seattle. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but Seattle acquired Classic from Paris, and he is now in their starting lineup. He's replacing Decimate, who departed from the roster after about a week or so. And Seattle now has Classic, kind of a reunion of like former Luminosity guys. I know Octane and Classic were on like the IW roster together with, I believe it was Slacked and someone else. Maybe John Saints. Okay, so I mean Saints. He's a challengers player. They've been teams have been inquiring about him. Maybe we can do a LG reunion. Slacked is also on the bench, so this is actually one of the more probable ones, not the Optic Dynasty one that I suggested a few weeks ago. So what do you make of Classic moving from the Legion to the Surge?
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. That was kind of like the thing that made sense about Classic coming to this team in my mind is he's played with Octane. He was on, I think it was when they were on Rise with like Looney and Slacked in Black Ops 3, and then IW on LG with that roster plus Saints minus Looney. And then he was on LG with Gunless in Black Ops 4 when Octane moves to Hunter Thieves, and they went. They won event. He won events with Octane in both of those other games, and he won that. The Fort Worth, the infamous Rampart event with Gunless in Black Ops 4. So I've always thought Nicky D is a really underrated player. He's one of those guys he's even said it in his announcement video today. He's a role player, right? Like he's not the guy you're expecting to go out there and drop 2.0 KD. He's gonna do the dirty work, take your long routes, etc. All that stuff, and that's like the kind of player that guys like Octane and Gunless, like if he's baiting out for them, they're the players who want to pick up those kills. And I'm not saying pad the stats, but that's just the first phrase that come to mind where they're gonna try to pick up the kills with Nicky D going in first. This is an interesting move from that perspective. I don't know how much this really changes things for the Surge. Like I don't know if this is the move that puts them over the edge, gets them into champs. We talked about last pod, obviously, that if they thought they were in a position where they might not make champs, that a guy like Sensor could have been the move, but obviously they decided to go in another direction, and they get a guy that 2/3 of the current starting roster has experience with. So we're going to have to see, again, kind of like you were just touching on with the Vivid and Fellow swap. They have limited practice coming into Stage 4. They're already behind because they're in last place in terms of CDL points. So they have an uphill battle this stage, and it's kind of, obviously it's not make or break because there's another stage after this, but you got to try to put a dent in that hole, in my opinion, right now to try and make it easier on yourselves going into Stage 5. So we're going to have to see how this lineup works together.
Yeah, it's disappointing for all the Doug fans out there that it doesn't look like Seattle at this point in the season is making that move. But like you said, Classic is a dependable player. I don't think there's going to be any surprises with him. It's not like he's going to completely change his game, his style or anything, or his role in the game, because that's just kind of who he is. It's been years of people saying he is just like a glue guy, essentially. He holds a team together. He's a Chino, essentially. Chino's not a star player. He's not coming in to drop 1.5 KDs or anything, but he's there to help the team in however he can, and maybe it'll work for Seattle. They've had a lot of issues just winning. It's been a long run for them since the beginning of the first season, and it's continued into the second season. They had some positives. I believe it was during Stage 2 group play. They looked like maybe they were improving. I think even in Stage 3, at one point or another, they looked all right, and they just haven't been able to consistently do it, which is important especially in group play when you need to win at least 2 matches to even have a shot to get into the top 3 in your group, and preferably 3 or 4 to actually ensure that you get into group play. So it's been a really rough time for them. Other teams that we think are making changes, Paris reportedly is going to sign Zaptius, who played with London in Stage 3 and was replaced by the returning Alex. I believe Crone reported that on .esports.com. You edited that article, I didn't. So that looks to be something that they could do. He would obviously be replacing Classic in the lineup unless they just randomly announce another roster change and bring in somebody else. I don't see that happening, but reportedly Zaptius going to the Paris Legion, and London, because they didn't announce their starting roster for Stage 4. We know that Alex will be in the starting roster, so that's one player, and you would assume that Shawnee will also be there, but it really seems like Zed might be the odd man out. This isn't confirmed or anything, but it does seem that Afro, who has been in challengers in Europe and he's kind of been stuck there because of visa issues for the entire season so far, that now that he is in America, that he could be replacing Zed in the starting lineup. What are your thoughts on Zaptius and Afro?
Yeah, I think the Zappiest change has to be one. How do I want to word this? It just, to me, like, Zaptius and Classic are kind of similar players in the sense of like their role on a team. Like they're kind of just like that role player sub. I think Zaptius' search is a little better than Classic's, but aside from that, I'm not sure how much this changes unless it's like a honeymoon period thing, or B, like they just feel like they somehow have more chemistry with Zaptius. We saw Temp, when Temp joined the roster, he had previous experience playing with Aqua and Classic. And obviously Zaptius doesn't have any experience playing with these guys as far as I remember, unless they're no, I think at the end of Black Ops 4 when Zaptius was on Midnight, Classic was on UIU, so I don't think there was any. Oh wait, that doesn't matter anyway. So I'm just making nonsense up now. But either way, I'm not sure how much that change affects Paris. Obviously, for the Paris is winning champs crew, they hope that Paris has a strong Stage 4 honeymoon phase, however you want to word it, because they're on the outside looking in right now, so they need to get some points and they need to do it fast. So yeah, obviously that's what they're. We're gonna have to see what Zaptius brings to the table for Paris. He performed well for London. They went on a little bit of a run in the Stage 4 major, and I think he's a good player. So we'll see. I think the bigger question for Paris right now is just between Scraps and Temp. Like they were kind of flip flopping between who was running the second sub and second AR last stage. So we're gonna have to see what's going on with them, who's running what in the stage, how they're able to gel with Zaptius and stuff like that. For London, I think it's another case where we kind of touched on it last week where we were talking about it. If Afro comes into the lineup, you have this promising, talented amateur player, and you just got to see what you have in him, right? We've talked about that numerous times, most notably with Hydra earlier in the season.
Hell Hydra.
It just comes down to you think this guy is talented and can hang with the big dogs, and you're going to throw him into the fire and see what he can do. Obviously, we don't know for sure if that's the case. All indications from scrims that we've seen streamed and stuff recently seem like the lineup will be Afro, Alex, Paul X, and Shawnee. But yeah, we'll have to see. London is in that group with New York, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
So yeah, so we would get to see Afro versus Hydra, which would be pretty cool if that ends up happening. But yeah, kind of similar. Like all these teams, aside from LA Thieves and Dallas, these teams that we've just been most recently talking about, Seattle, Paris, and London, they're 3 of the 4 teams on the outside looking in for champs right now. So It's kind of, I don't know. It's interesting to see. Um, Not really interesting, but I guess it's good to see that those teams are being proactive and trying to make something happen. They're not waiting until the absolute last minute because obviously this is the penultimate stage. It's not the last stage. So they have some time, but they're being proactive and trying to make something happen. We've seen London make numerous changes this year. Seattle and Paris, not so much, only a handful, less than a handful. But still, they're coming into stage four and going to try to shake things up at the top.
Yeah, so of the bottom four teams, which is LAG, London, Paris, and Seattle, the bottom three teams, London, Paris, and Seattle, they all made changes going into the fourth stage, which you would kind of expect because, like you said, this is the penultimate stage, and while it's a bad performance in stage four doesn't like absolutely guarantee that you can't get out of the bottom four and get into the top eight for champs, it makes it so much more difficult if you win one or maybe no matches in stage four, especially if you're, Seattle, really any of these bottom four teams, because there's only 20 points separating London, Paris, and Seattle in the bottom three, and then LAG's at 90 points. They're 30 points back from eighth place, so they're in a little better spot, and they also have all of the they've only made, I think, one change all season. That was Vivid getting benched. So they have a lot of chemistry between at least three of them. And with they have more play time and practice than the rest of these teams. But man, stage four is really big for everybody. Not just these bottom three, but especially them, because man, that's a lot of money that you would be missing out on, and the prestige of playing at the World Championship event. And you don't want to be one of those bottom four teams and not even get the opportunity. We presume it would be on land to compete for millions of dollars on land to end the second season. So we'll see about that. That'll be interesting to watch out for. And before we get into our predictions for the first week of stage four, we should note that Standoff S&D. Standoff, obviously, a super famous Black Ops 2 map. Maybe, I mean, it would either be Raid or Standoff, the best Black Ops 2 map, and one of my favorite maps of all time. Standoff Search and Destroy has been added into the Call of Duty League map rotation. It replaces Checkmate Search and Destroy, which is probably a sigh of relief for most competitive players out there, considering it was a one bomb site map. But so we see Standoff come in. You're obviously a big search guy, although you do play GB rules, and they have some weird rules sometimes and weird maps. I point to Crash in the last game that I played. I literally wanted to throw my PS4 out a window every time I played that map. But what do you think about Standoff coming into the rotation?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that jumps off the page, right, is it's only being added for search, right? It's not coming in for hardpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's interesting. I've only played a handful of league play games where I got standoff hardpoint, and just for me, it felt a little fast. I don't really know if it's like the speed grip in this game or something, but like it just felt really fast to me. And we saw complaints. I think Tactical Rab did a video of like the pros talking about like spawn issues and stuff on standoff hardpoint. So it seems all indications suggest that the pros obviously gave some input. They think, or presumably they think standoff hardpoint just didn't work in this game for whatever reason, and they're not adding it right now. We could see it in stage 5 in champs if Treyarch makes some fixes or whatever. Not really sure, but I'm definitely excited to see it in search. Most notably, like you just said, for GB at least, standoff was added to the GB variant rule set, which is just a slightly different from the CDL rule set. But it replaced Miami instead of Checkmate. So that was kind of like part of the debate, right, between the community.
Mm-hmm.
Like some people wanted standoff to replace Miami, others wanted Checkmate. But it seems like the pros actually realize, which I firmly believe, that Miami is a better map than Checkmate. I'm in no way saying Miami is a great map. It is just a better map for search than Checkmate, in my opinion, mainly for the reason that you brought up, where Checkmate really only has one viable bomb site. At least Miami has both sites that you can make plays on. So that's interesting. But again, I played the 1GB I was talking about tonight with Trem on standoff, where I didn't do too hot, but I lost internet map 3 and ended up costing, so that was tragic. But I played a couple league play games of standoff search too, and again, it just feels a little fast. You can get from the offensive spawn for searches by the optic van and a bomb sites over by like playground or tractor, and you can kind of get over there super fast. Obviously, there's no smokes in pro play, but like for GBs, you can throw a smoke like at mid statue, and you can just like cross over to A and just try to get the bomb down super quick. But yeah, it's like you said, a really fan favorite and popular map from the past. So gonna be super excited to see it in CDL for stage 4. With it replacing Checkmate though, one of the most interesting things about that is that FaZe were, really good at Checkmate search recently in the most recent stage. I don't know their exact record, but it was brought up on
7-1.
Yeah. So it was brought up on broadcast multiple times that they were a strong Checkmate search team. So they're losing that map, and we saw them experiment, even before they brought in Tupac. They were experimenting with stuff like Express S&D when that was added to the map pool. And it seemed like they were experimenting a lot with Apocalypse. It was in a lot of their series, I felt like, in group play. So it could be, especially with FaZe losing Checkmate search, we could see FaZe be one of those teams that tries to play a lot of standoff search early and figure stuff out. So I, for one, will be excited to see it back in competitive. And I'm just a little heartbroken in the sense that many episodes ago, when standoff was first teased, or it might have been even before that, when we were just talking about will standoff come in, I talked about the opportunity of a potential world where we saw just a Black Ops 2 3.0, right? Like standoff hardpoint, Express S&D, and raid control. The team plays all Black Ops 2 maps and picks up a 3.0. Obviously, we're not going to be able to see that with Express and Standoff both being search maps, but there's a world where Express and Standoff are both S&D maps in a best of 5, and we could see a raid hardpointer control, so a team could win 3 Black Ops 2 maps in a series. That would be, I guess that's the next best thing.
Yeah, so what you were saying, round 11 stats they tweeted out after Standoff got announced, and they tweeted out a table of the team's current Checkmate S&D records. FaZe was 7-1, Optic was 6-2. Everybody else had either like a 56% win percentage or lower. London, they were 0-3, so they kind of avoided it mostly, and Minnesota only played it twice this season because apparently they really hated it. So I mean, personally, just from a viewership or a viewer perspective, because I don't play COD, man, like, I hate Miami so much. Like, it makes me visibly ill to watch that map, or physically ill to watch that map. But yeah, I understand it from like a competitive standpoint. You don't want everybody to keep going to the same bomb site all the time. So yeah, Checkmate goes, which is whatever. I didn't particularly like Checkmate, but at least we get Standoff in one of the game modes. That's the most important thing, because it is a goated map. All I remember, I mean, the most memorable moment for me is Nifty on CTF Standoff.
CTF.
I believe it was like UMG Atlanta or Dallas or something like that. And he was teaming with Paul Magna, because of course he was. And
Ego.
Yeah, so that's my most memorable Standoff moment, and I'm just hopefully someone will get turned
More
on.
memorable than
What?
Go ahead.
No, what was you gonna say?
I was gonna say more memorable than the Optic fan for you.
Yeah, because I'm not an Optic fan, so I mean that's a horrible moment. I was hoping that I believe it was Unite. I was hoping that they would
It was
captain
Unite.
flag. So I mean, Killa's career was ruined on that map, so we don't talk about that anymore. But yeah, I believe Tanner included that in his article today about
Oh,
standoff coming in. But yeah, it triggered me. So let's move on. Um, for the so let's talk about the matches coming up for this week. Starting on, I believe it would be Wednesday or Thursday, May
Thursday.
27th. Yeah,
Yep.
so Thursday, May 27th. We have two matches: Atlanta FaZe versus the Paris Legion, and Toronto Ultra versus the Florida Mutineers. Who do you have in these two matches?
I think it's pretty cut and dry. Atlanta should take care of business against Paris, and I think Toronto beats Florida. Of the two, I would expect the Florida Toronto series to be a little bit closer. But we did see earlier in the season, Paris pushed Atlanta to a game 5. I don't remember when it was. I think it was like the last map of like stage 2 group play or stage wasn't stage 3, so it had to have been stage 1 or stage 2 group play. Different Paris roster now, but we have seen them have, some form of success against FaZe. So it could be a closer series than I'm thinking right now on paper, but yeah, I think cut and dry, Atlanta and Toronto should win both these matches.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would imagine the Florida series has a bigger chance of an upset, but Toronto is still, either the second or third best team in the league, in my opinion. And I mean, it's going to be hard to beat them in any match, especially. I mean, they got to be a little bit motivated because they didn't do as well as they had hoped. So maybe it's going to be kind of like the Simp series where he said that just pissed me off, and then he comes out and he absolutely destroys the next team. So maybe that'll be the same for Toronto. Hopefully not for Florida fans because that wouldn't be too fun. But yeah. So on Friday we have Dallas versus London and Optic versus Minnesota. I mean, it's at least the first match you would think is kind of cut and dry, but we don't really know with these rosters. So what are you thinking for Dallas versus London?
Yeah, I think that's not that cut and dry. Based on the standings, you would expect
Hmm.
Dallas to come out and take it, but again, we're seeing two pretty new rosters here. Um, Man, it's tough. Part of me really actually wants to say London here, but both teams could be in that honeymoon phase, and it could come down to the wire. I gotta go Dallas 3-2. I'm just gonna think, if it comes down to the searches, Dallas should have, you know, the clutch factor there in search, and that could be what gives them the win. But I think this should be a really close series. I would be surprised if it was like a 3-0 either way.
Yeah, I'll say Dallas as well. I'm not. I mean, there's really no way to, predict this as we have so much information on either of these teams because Afro has played a handful of scrims that we've seen, and I don't think I've seen anything regarding Vivid and Empire and how they're doing in scrims and how they're adjusting to Illy going back to his old role and Vivid slotting in, and so we don't really know. I would say Dallas just based on the talent on the team, and that's really all, and just the chemistry between obviously the three championship players. So I would say Dallas just on that, but there's really no way of knowing for this kind of series. And then
Yep.
we have Optic versus Minnesota. Minnesota making the change. We talked about it on the last episode. Major Maniac coming back into the roster, and he's replacing Accuracy. What do you think for this kind of series?
I believe would Minnesota be 2-0 with Standy against Optic?
What
They
was
beat
the
him in group
second?
play and at the major,
Um, yeah,
the
I mean,
previous major.
I'm kind of blanking on that
They're
major
all
win, but I know
yeah.
they definitely swept them in group play
Well, the
and
major
stage
win is when
three.
Accuracy got the
Oh yeah.
lineup on Moscow
So
Search.
yeah, they're probably like 6-2 in map count then against Optics since Standy
Yeah,
came in.
I think that sounds right. So this could be another close one. Obviously, like you said, Major Maniac is coming in the lineup. We don't know how that's going to work exactly, just because the last time we saw Major Maniac in the lineup, he was playing with accuracy and Priest and attached with the subs.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's going to be Priest and Major Maniac on the ARs with attached and standing on the subs. So it should be interesting. I think it more comes down to what optic we see, right? Like, that's just the big question mark with them right now is, are we going to see the optic that struggled in group play, or are we going to see the optic that played really well at the major? I'm going to go with optic just because I think based on their current form, if they carry how they produced at the major into stage 4 group play, they should be fine in this matchup, but this could be closer than some people expect.
I'll say optic, but I think they've just turned a corner in general. I mean, that's just the stance that I'll take until they obviously either just blow it and they look horrible, or they prove me right. But I would imagine that the major was an incredible boost of confidence into that lineup, because it did look like they were not confident, or they didn't really kind of trust each other, because that's what happens when a struggling team is in a slump. They look at each other like, man, like, step it up, and like everybody does that. They look to their left, they look to their right, and they say like, you suck, and like everybody kind of turns on each other. And they had there was a very critical point during that LAG series. Had they choked 2 of those 3 maps and they lost that series and they went out with a top 10 finish at the major, no money, no kind of award other than 10 measly CEO points, I think you would have seen kind of like a breakdown, because that's the biggest and most, that would have been the biggest and the most surprising result of the season of any team, in my opinion. So they had that point. They could have really choked it, and they could have lost, and they could have had that horrible result, but they didn't. They won, and they kept winning, and they kept winning and kept winning until I believe that they got to 4th or something, and they lost in the loser semis, which is nothing to be ashamed of, especially when you don't have the benefit of starting in the winner's bracket and having the opportunity to lose one match and then rebound. So I think that they've really turned a corner in terms of that performance. I don't think they'll slump as hard or as much as they were before. So I would say optic in this, but it's going to be interesting to see how Major Maniac performs now in the roster with Standy, since we didn't get to see that earlier in the season. So let's go to Saturday. We have another Minnesota match. They play the Paris Legion, and then Los Angeles Thieves versus Seattle, and the New York Subliners versus the Los Angeles Gorillas. So let's start at the Minnesota Paris match. We've talked about each of these teams. Real quickly, what do you think, Rocker versus Legion?
Yeah, it's always tough here. I mean, we technically don't even know who the Legion's 4th player is. Yeah. We have a strong inkling of who it is, but so we're just making these predictions assuming that Zaptius is that player for the Paris. But again, it's another case where we got two new lineups coming in, and we don't really know what to expect from either team. I'm gonna think that Minnesota will get the job done. It's interesting because Zaptius should help Paris's search too, but Major Maniac is a good search player as well. And obviously, accuracy was no slouch in S&D with, his clutches that we've seen throughout the years. So, I can't even really say that, like, one of these teams will, has an edge in search. Kind of like, even though, Zaptius should help improve Paris's search, I think, Dallas should still be a better search team than Paris. That was kind of why I was leaning toward Dallas in that previous Paris matchup for this week. But this is another one where I think it'll be close, and I'm going to go with Minnesota. But man, like you saw Minnesota just in phases this year. Even when they brought in Standy and saw success, it was like they started out strong in search, and then they kind of, in the major, they weren't as strong in search, but they improved in hard point. And then last stage, it was more of, struggling in hard point and doing a little bit better in search, but still, they weren't getting the results that they got right away with Standy. So it'll be interesting to see how they do. I really, without seeing either of these teams play with this lineup, it's pretty tough for me. But I'll go with Minnesota here.
I'll go with Paris in this. I think it's weird. I mean, I'm looking at the stats right now, and Classic he's one of the top players in the league in terms of first bloods. I think he's second, and then Zaptius is not nearly as he's not up near the top. I believe, so he's 17th in first bloods, which is still good. It's like in the top like third of
Smaller
the league.
sample size too.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe if he can replace kind of that, Classic does not have a good S&D KD. Actually, is the second worst in the league. So that's kind of surprising considering he's second best in first bloods. But yeah, if Zaptius can help them search and kind of just stabilize them, because they've been inconsistent the last really like stage and a half. They really haven't been able to find their groove, and I think there's a lot of talent on that team. So it's kind of surprising. I really think it's just that Minnesota doesn't have that much experience with this lineup either. So it's not like they're going in and they're playing phase, which they will have to do. But so this is a little easier, and there's a very real possibility that Minnesota and Paris will be coming in 0-1, considering how tough their first matchups are of the week. So there's really no advantage there. I just think Paris might be able to squeak out a win, but like you said, it's going to be a very close call just because we don't really know anything about the teams and how they're playing currently, and how these new rosters will shape up.
Yep.
And to move on, let's go to LAT versus Seattle. Again, two new rosters. I really hate these preview matchups because it's just the same thing over and over. So LAT versus Seattle, two new rosters. What do you think?
I want to give. Man.
I mean, I guess LAT are not technically new because they have had this roster before and they did perform well. But in terms of actually, recent practice, we don't think that they've had a lot of practice together.
And that's what. Let me just look real quick for results for stage 3, because they were in the same group.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine the LAT won this match.
Well, no, LAT won, but that's what I want to see what the score was. Oh wow, it was a 3-2, and LA Thieves reverse swept. It was on Friday, April 23rd, so I was obviously only played that last one. So this was obviously with this current lineup, and Seattle had Looney. Yeah, it was one of the early matches, so they did have Looney. So Seattle took Apocalypse Hardpoint 250, 223, close map. Seattle takes Moscow Search 6-4, they go up 2-0. And then LAT win Raid Control 3-0, Checkmate Hardpoint 250, 233, and Raid Search 6-4. So all the maps were close except for the Control.
Which is not surprising
with only one
Seattle.
Yep. So yeah, I think we gotta go. I gotta go with the Thieves here. Based on that, it's that lineup, and then versus Classic replacing Looney in that sense. And kind of like you were saying, I think it makes sense that Classic actually has a low KD, just from like if he's getting a lot of first bloods, that means he's going in first. So he's either getting first blood or he's getting first blooded likely. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense in that regard, and we could continue to see that with Seattle potentially. But yeah, without seeing, Seattle, I guess, because we have seen this LA Thieves roster in some form. I will just go with LA Thieves here based on past success with the TJ pre-Huke lineup.
Yeah, I mean, I can't pick Seattle until they start somewhat consistently winning Control. I know Control is the least important game mode, but it's infinitely, not technically, but it's much harder to win a series when you have to win either 2 searches or 2 hard points. And regardless of if you win 2, you have to win 1 of the hard points or 1 of the searches. It's really tough, and they have to start winning controls every now and then. To win three, literally three, it is nearly June. They've won 3 control maps this season. No, and it should come as no surprise that they are in last place in the league. It's very difficult to win any matches when you're winning 3 control maps over like 3.5 months. So I'll just say LAT. This roster did show to be pretty impressive. They weren't like super dominant or anything, but they picked up wins and they were close to getting first or second in the group with TJ in the lineup in Stage 3 group play. So I'll say LAT for this one. Really nothing else to say there. New York versus LAG to end Saturday. New York obviously a second place finish at the major. LAG, like the second or third team out of the major. So obviously LAG goes and they sweep New York, right?
Is that what you're picking?
Sure. Yeah, I'll say LAG win. Let's just
Jesus,
say that.
Man.
Eventually they're gonna prove me right, and then I'm gonna look like a genius because
they just keep losing and they don't prove you right.
But then I'm still loyal, and maybe they'll continue to tweet at me because I'm a stand for LAG.
Yeah, I gotta go with New York here. They've just looked really strong. Most notably, we saw their success in hardpoint since they've added Hydra to the team. And like the Gorillas aren't really like a top caliber hardpoint team in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it'll be tough for LAG, who I would think their best mode with Chino would be Search. I don't know if that's true. But I see it tough for them to get to a Game 5 scenario in this series, which would mean they would have to take a respawn off New York. So I'm going to pick New York 3-1.
Yeah, I mean, if you put a gun to my head and you said you have to pick the winner of this, obviously I'm picking New York. But there is no gun in my head
gun
yet.
in your room.
So I'm going to go with LAG. And there could be a way that LAG win. They're probably not going to win either of those hard points because it just doesn't seem likely statistically that they'll do it. In terms of control, I don't have the stats for just when Hydra was in the lineup because, I mean, a lot of websites don't break it down that much. But in terms of throughout the season, New York has a 42% win percentage in control. LAG has a 32% win percentage. So there's not much difference. LAG's the second worst team in control. If you look at the control rankings, that should give you a pretty good indication of how good teams are, although Dallas is 9th, so that's pretty interesting. But LAG, they can steal that control. They've really blown a few of those controls. I know against Optic they had an opportunity to steal that control and they lost it, and that ended up being the like a turning point in the series. They could have went up 2-1 in that series. So I'll just say that they can and maybe they will win that control, and then we know that they're a good search team. I don't know what they are with Chino, but they're I think they're 4th in the league in win percentage in search, and like you said, search wins championships, and obviously they're going to win a lot of championships in the future. So let's go with
banking on 2, 3, 5.
Yeah, it's not very likely, but it's more likely than like what 1, 4, 5 or something. Like that's what basically
oh yeah
what Seattle's got to bank on. So yeah, I'll say LAG win. Oh my god, why am I doing this to myself? On Sunday we have the last 3 matches of the week. Florida versus London, Toronto versus Dallas, and Atlanta versus Optic. They love this matchup, Atlanta versus Optic, and they are actually finishing the week off on it like they should have last time. So
I'm kind of surprised it's this early though. Usually they've waited until
it's like stage 1 all over again, because stage 1 they finished with this one, and then I think they They do it in stage 2 as well, but I thought they
They
didn't.
didn't play in stage 2, I don't think.
I don't know what I'm thinking of then. Maybe I'm
I
thinking of
think they were in.
LAT versus Optic then.
Oh no, last stage they weren't the last match. They were on the last day, but Minnesota Dallas was the last match. I think that's what you're thinking of.
That's disappointing. So let's start with the least interesting of these matchups in terms of big names. Florida versus London. Who do you have?
I gotta go with Florida. Could be a situation where, Afro and Alex come into the lineup, they're absolutely just frying, and who knows, maybe they upset Dallas on Friday, and then they come in and they're hot on momentum and they beat Florida. That's the tough thing about making these predictions without seeing anything, but just based on paper, I'm going to go with Florida here.
Yeah, I'll say Florida too. There's really no reason to not go with Florida at the moment, at least against London. Toronto versus Dallas. We've seen this a few times. I believe the most recent one was. Did they play at the major? Wasn't that? Didn't Toronto beat?
No, because Dallas went 06 map count.
That was
They
Atlanta
lost
versus
to
Dallas.
FaZe and Optic.
Yeah. So maybe the most recent one was Huke's or Fellows' first match with the
Sounds
Empire.
right.
So that would have been in Stage 3 group play. Toronto obviously won that, I believe, 3-0. What do you think here, Toronto versus Dallas?
Gotta go with Toronto. Even if, like I was hinting at earlier, for Dallas versus London, where I think, search with Vivid could be improved. Even though I said Fellow is a good search player, but regardless, I can't really say that like Dallas's search can beat Toronto's, just because even though Toronto had some slip ups at the last major leading up to that, it was like 33 days or something like that before they lost the search map, so they're a really good search team. And again, it could be something similar to like what you said, where they could be upset or angry from their performance at the major and they're coming out with like a vengeance. We'll obviously have to wait to see, but based on everything we've seen recently, gotta go with Toronto here.
Yeah, same. Ultra's just the more experienced team with this lineup, and we don't really know what to expect with Dallas. It's just kind of the same old, but not the same old in the last match. We actually have two rosters that are going into the match with set lineups. That is a rare occurrence in the CDL to start off a stage. Atlanta, who are coming off of another major victory, and Optic, who's coming off an incredible losers bracket run at the major and finished top 4 and kind of saved at least a lot of CDL points along the way. FaZe versus Optic to close out the week. Who do you have here?
Gotta go with FaZe. Everything we've seen most recently makes me think FaZe should be able to take care of business here. But to go on your point, they're the only two teams at this point who haven't made a roster change now, right?
Yeah, and you would kind of expect that, at least from a brand perspective. So it's nice that the two most popular teams are also the two teams that are sticking with their lineups.
Oh, so we saw them play in Stage 3 group play, obviously, but that was the series where there was apparently the snafu or the mistake with the server email or whatever. And like Atlanta was on the Atlanta server, and apparently, because I just looked up the scores, and Atlanta kind of smoked Optic. So maybe this will be a closer matchup if they get the server situated. But I'm still leaning FaZe here.
Yeah, I mean, if they put it on, say, like a Dallas server, and then we see Optic just do the same thing to Atlanta, that'd be interesting. Yeah, hopefully that doesn't happen again, because I hate seeing CDL players, cop out to the internet excuse when that's the only thing. Everybody has that excuse if you make it, and hopefully they just don't screw up the next time. And I don't even know if that was on Optic or if that was a CDL issue. I couldn't really tell from their tweet. But either way, I think Atlanta wins this. I mean, I'd be pretty surprised if Optic won, to be honest, because although Optic is a good search team, Atlanta is a better search team. And Optic has looked shaky in Respawn. They lost Hardpoint. to LAG, who is not a great hardpoint team. And Atlanta has been able to basically beat every single team in the league, regardless of how hot they've been. The only team that they didn't beat was Toronto in the Stage 2 Major, and Toronto is just incredibly, incredibly hot. And even then, they were able to take hard points off of them. So I think that they're just like the better team overall. And that's not a shot at Optic. I just think Atlanta is the best team in the world, and they've kind of proven it over the last 3.5 months consistently. So I'll say Atlanta, although I hope it goes down to Game 5, Round 11, and then we could see somebody snake, and then the entire community loses their mind. Hopefully it's Celium, just for the memes, but that would be fun regardless. Yeah, so I'll go with FaZe, and yeah, that wraps up our group play predictions for the first week. We'll be doing this next week on Tuesday, and we'll go through the next 10. Do you have any other topics before we head out?
I don't think we're gonna get any questions in the chat, so just real quick, why don't we do like a very early prediction for the top 3 of each group? Even though we kind of touched on it earlier, let's just like say what we think it'll be. I don't care if you want me to go first or not.
Yeah, go first. I'll pull up the tweet.
Okay. So Group A, I'm gonna say FaZe coming first. Yeah, what do I think you're gonna say? I don't know what you're gonna say here. I'm just gonna go FaZe 1, Optic 2, Thieves 3. The reason I had some slight hesitation there is obviously we saw this pre-Huke LA Thieves lineup beat Optic's current lineup. So that could be a scenario where LA Thieves jumps Optic for that 2 seed, but I just think those are the best 3 teams in Group A, unless the Rocker really show up with Major Maniac, pull some upsets, or obviously Paris or Seattle make a very unexpected run. I think those will be the top 3 in Group A, and then B, I'm gonna stick with Subliners at 1. That might be a little controversial, just because Toronto's actually a major champion, even though New York came in second. I just think Subliners have looked strong right now, and it should come down to Subliners versus Ultra for first in this group, and I think Subliners will take it. So I'll say Subliner 1, Toronto 2, and then I don't think it matters who I say here because you're gonna say LEG 3. So I'm gonna go Mutineers 3 for Big Wake.
You are wrong. I wasn't gonna say LAG 3. I was gonna say LAG 1, and then probably Toronto second, New York third. How can you even argue with that kind of logic? If you put a gun to my head, I say that LAG does go 3, and they end up jumping Florida. I don't know. I really don't know what Dallas is going to be like. That's the biggest wild card there, because they could turn out to be the best team in that group, depending on the day. And it just, I don't know. Like it's a really weird change that they're making. Or they made the change with Huke, which is weirder, but we don't really know what to expect. But if they come out and they beat Toronto on Sunday, everybody's like, oh crap, like this is, everybody's pick'ems are probably ruined at that point. But yeah, I'll say LAG 1, Toronto 2, New York 3. And then as far as Group A, I agree with you. I'll say Minnesota 3 over LAT, but really that could go either way. I think Minnesota do lose that first match to Optic, but I think it'll probably come down to whoever wins that LAT Minnesota match. I think it'll be, you either get 3 and 2 and get that 3rd seed, or you get 2 and 3 and you get that 4th seed. I don't really see Paris or Seattle making a real run at the top 3 here, but I'll say Minnesota. They squeak out a win against LAT. I don't know when they play, but they play either in the second or third week. So I'll say
Yeah.
Minnesota squeaks it out and they get the top 3.
Okay. Yeah. Just I think, like you said, I think classifying Dallas as a wild card team is pretty good, just because, like you said, we don't know how they're going to perform with Vivid in the lineup. So I'm just I'm trusting in Big Wake for that one, putting him 3. So yeah, there you go. That's our way too early predictions with no match evidence to support them for the new rosters, at least for Stage 4 group play.
Before we head out, we should probably give our Stage 4 winner predictions. I know we've been kind of slacking on this. We're kind of, we do this sometimes, we don't do it sometimes. But now that I remembered, so who do you think will win the Stage 4 major? I guess just give the grand finals. Like, who do you think will get first and second, and who do you think will actually win that grand final?
Well, obviously, we have to bring up that this is the first LAN that we're going to see for COD since last March, I'm pretty sure it was. I know it was the LA home series for MW. I don't remember if it was, I believe it was in March.
It was, yeah.
Regardless, it's been over 14 months since the last COD LAN. So, there are some people in the community who think that could be a very, cause a big difference for some players. There's guys like we've talked about, guys like Mac, we haven't really seen on LAN before.
Venom,
Awakening
Vivid
was
even.
at Champs and Black Ops 4. Vivid was at Champs too, I believe. He had like a really good search game against Aches' NV team, but I don't remember if that was at Champs or not, but I'm pretty sure it was at some LAN event. So I know, so some of these players have limited LAN experience.
Yeah,
I mean, even guys like Illy and Shotzi, right?
Yeah.
So it will be interesting. I personally don't think it'll affect the top of the standings that much. I still think I will say FaZe wins the Stage 4 major just because, they're the best team right now. And I will say, just for the storylines, that Optic comes in second.
Okay, so that'd be interesting. I don't really think it'll have that much impact going to LAN from online. Every time we do this, every time there's like a pretty long break, obviously this is incredibly long and it was out of people's control. But anytime that we have an extended break between LAN events and say a new team or a new player pops up and they're really good online, people try to take down their accomplishments and say, well, you only did it because of online. Shotzi has actually been the subject of that because he struggled on LAN for the first few months. It was really like 2 events that he struggled at, and then he obviously became the MVP online. So people are saying, well, you're just kind of a warrior. I think all of that's BS. I think there are guys that are better online, and there are teams better online. These Quad Central hosts, like it's been proven, like there's a reason that half the league is in Dallas and in the Fort Worth area. It's because there's an advantage online. But I don't think that these teams, I don't think Optic, just because they all play together at the same location and they all live like within the same distance from each other, I don't think that they're just going to drop off the face of the earth as soon as they get to LAN. And I don't think that any of those teams will do that. Whoever does end up doing poorly on LAN in this first event is going to be the subject of some criticism and some memes online, but I don't think that it's that big of a difference as far as results, because we've had 3.5 months of results to look at. So I don't think there's a huge difference there. As far as my top 2, I'll go with FaZe winning as well, because I made the mistake of picking Toronto last time, and I did pretty well with FaZe in Stage 1. So I'll go with FaZe winning the Stage 4 major on LAN. and I'll say that they're probably gonna be. I'll say Toronto. I think Toronto has a good opportunity to continue their good play. It'll be interesting to see how they play on land, because
Yep.
they are like, if of all the teams, I think they're the most distant out of everybody because they're all in Toronto and everybody
Yeah.
else is in the States, most of them in Texas. So, at least for them, I think the internet thing could be, not, it doesn't make them worse or anything, but I just think it's a big difference. Especially, they'll have to end up traveling quite a ways down to Dallas from Toronto, and most of these teams are actually located in the Dallas Fort Worth area. So it's a little bit interesting to see how they adjust to that. But I think they're a really good team. Man, they're gonna have to improve, I guess, in search of all things to beat FaZe, just like any other team.
Or just get back to where they were at
Yeah,
Stage 2 Major.
yeah. So I mean, if they could steal a search or two, obviously if you steal two searches, that's incredible. You obviously won the series. But if you steal a search and you're able to get at least one hard point win, I mean, as long as you're not Seattle, you have a really good chance of winning that series. And so that's all I have to say about that. So I say Atlanta and Toronto get top two at the major. It'll be interesting though to see how land works out. I hope there's not a bunch of issues. It's going to
Yeah.
be tough for production, I know, because they had a lot of problems adjusting from LAN to online last season in the middle of the year. Hopefully, they're a little more prepared. They're getting used to it. They know what's going to happen when they go back to LAN. But, we just got to be prepared for long delays like old MLG events or something like that.
Oh boy.
The stuff that Vicroy always complains about when COD events are on. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but we shouldn't be surprised about it. If there's nothing else, we could probably wrap up the show. You have anything else?
I'll just say real quick, thinking in my head, the optic pick for a second, it's kind of more based on the fact that, guys like Scump and Formal have, not Formal as much as Scump has been, I think he's been saying, or at least it seems like he thinks that um, they will perform better on land than maybe they have online. So I think if fans were at this event, and the green wall was able to show up, it would be really interesting to see how Optic performs at the first land. But putting Optic second might be a little ambitious, but I'm going to stick with it for the storylines.
Yeah, there were fans. They are actually a game changer. There's really no such thing
Oh,
as a
yeah.
home field advantage for 11 of the 12 teams. I guess FaZe in some certain points, if Optic is not involved, they might get the majority of fans to root for them. But yeah, it's gonna be. Hopefully, Champs is like that, because if we could get another Cloud9 Optic situation from BO3 Champs, where I love that setup where everybody is around them, not looking at them. So that
That
would
was
be
really
cool.
cool.
They should do it. I think they did it in the LCS. They did the circle, and they also did, I believe, in the Boston CS:GO major where Cloud9 won. So Adam Apicella, if you're listening, of Esports Engine, please make the circle. Don't make the stage. Please just make it a circle. Have everybody surround them. That's what I want out of the probably Champs or something. I don't know if they're ever gonna do land this season, but or like land with fans and everything. But yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't really have anything else. You want to wrap up?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for tuning in. As always, guys, we appreciate it. If you haven't already, you can subscribe on whatever platform you guys listen to us on. If you do listen on Apple Podcast, there was an issue. I don't know if you want to touch on it or you figured it out, but there was an issue last week where like the Apple Podcast episode didn't show up right
Yeah.
away. So we're unsure if that'll happen again. Hopefully it doesn't. But if you do listen, or you are listening now on Apple, and you want to give us a 5-star rating, we would greatly appreciate that. But yeah, you got anything?
Just to follow up on that, I don't really know what was going on. That seemed to be a Apple Podcast issue because I put it in the group chat, in our Twitter group chat, that Mina Kimes, who works for ESPN, she has a podcast, and she said that she was also running into issues with Apple Podcasts not refreshing for some of her listeners because I could see the podcast in my app because I was able to like tweet out the link and listen to the podcast and everything. So there was no issue on my end, but there was an issue obviously on yours, and I think a few other people in our group chat. So I don't really know what happened there. We distribute through Anchor, and I know that they're owned by Spotify, so I don't think there was a thing there. I think it just might have been a mistake on Apple Podcast part. Maybe they were down and it caused some delays in the feed. So hopefully that doesn't happen again. But we'll keep you guys updated on Twitter. You can follow on Twitter at Ego Chall Podcast. You can follow Bink on Twitter at JBink with 2Ks, and you can follow me at Prez Byers. We're verified except our podcast Twitter account. So you obviously know you're gonna get the best and the greatest takes if you follow us on Twitter. Subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Apple, Google, Spotify, all the podcasting platforms. And we'll be back next Tuesday, hopefully Tuesday night, 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That'll be June 1st. So yeah, I will be vaccinated. So I'll be vaccinated. That'll be cool. Not
We didn't even. I remember a couple episodes ago, you were talking about. You said like the following episode would be your first episode of you being graduated from college, and I don't think we ever actually did that. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. I have been graduated for 2 weeks now. It feels good. I don't have to pay loans for another 5.5 months, so that's exciting. If we do this podcast sometime in November and I look like I'm pulling my hair out and crying all day, it's because my loans have officially started and I have to pay thousands and thousands of dollars to some loan distributor. So yeah, that'll be fun. Yeah, so that's all I have. Yeah, come back next Tuesday, June 1st.
Yep. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and as always, send the chow.